Abel here, and
Scott Dirks from House of Heroes.
with the Comic Book Creation Challenge. Not just the Comic Book Creation Challenge, the Mark Gruenwald Comic Book Creation Challenge.
Very important.
Very important. One of the reasons that me and Scott got together, we want to do this Comic Book Creation Challenge is to let people know a couple of things. Number one, you can make it from here. You can make it from anywhere, because Mark did. Mark was an Oshkosh native, and we wanted to pay tribute to that and honor his role. Can you tell us a little something about Mark and his importance in Marvel?
Well, yeah, Mark grew up in Oshkosh. Actually, when you go back and look at the old comic books, he would write letters to the editor, kind of commenting on stories. You know, eventually he grew up. He did like a comic book strip for the UWO paper at the time, and eventually he worked his way into Marvel, where he was working on comics for a while, and eventually he became editor-in-chief. So he was, or the executive editor, they called it at the time, and he was in charge of everything, all the publishing for Marvel.
And he pretty much got the nickname as a janitor because he cleaned up the Marvel Universe pretty good for him, didn't he?
Well, he was the guy that he knew everything about Marvel, everything about all the characters. They actually have a book called The Official Handbook to the Marvel Universe, and that would not exist if it wasn't for Mark.
That's right. And Mark Gruenwald also wrote for Captain America more than anybody else. So it was a really big thing for him and a really big thing for us. So let's, should we get on to some of the winners?
Yes, I think it's time.
All right.
Our first category is going to be Sidekicks. It's the youngest category, ages 5 to 7. And it usually produces the most interesting content because it's the unbridled imagination of a 5 or 7-year-old, and it can get pretty crazy. This year was close competition. There was only 3/4 of a point that separated the winner and the second place. And the winner is Elena Hernandez from Oshkosh, Wisconsin for School Time Today. Elena Hernandez, congratulations, you are the winner. You are the winner of the Sidekicks category. Nice job. So are you surprised? A little bit?
Hi, my name is Elena Hernandez, and I love to draw. And I love to draw comic books a lot. And I won! Hooray!
Next up, we have our heroes. This is the 8 to 10-year-olds, and it gets a little bit better here. You get a little bit more congruent stories and a little bit more expansion on their universes. This one was really heavily filled with kittens, but the winner of this one happened to be Rune Severstad from Nina with Yolas versus the COVID creature. Now, this was really special for me because this was actually my pick last year for a special winner.
My name is Rune Severstad, and my comic's name is Yolas versus the Creepy Corona.
And where did you get this idea to do that comic?
Last year I did Yolas 2, which I made up myself.
Okay, and why did you have him fighting the creepy Corona this year?
So it would give inspiration to other people to help fight it too.
Great.
Well, I am going to do it again next year, and it's a really fun thing that you get 3 months to do during summer. And it keeps you off those electronics.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the people who organized the event?
Well, thank you. It's really fun. And it's also fun to see other people's work too.
And did you do anything online during this summer to help with the challenge?
Yes, there was a thing hosted by a couple of the winners from last year, and it was fun and gave you some tips on the challenge.
Great, so you learned something from that.
Yes, and it was free.
Next up is superheroes. The age group is 11 to 13. This was like the hardest category to judge this year. Everything was so close. But this category, the winner was the only submission to get a perfect score from one judge. One of the judges gave it the best score they could. The winner for this category is Talia Tan from Cecil for PPE League.
My name is Talia Tan. I made PPE League. What inspired me to create this story was I just wanted to find a cool scenario where, the coronavirus is going on, and that's how I started my story. I joined the comic book contest because when the COVID-19 started, we all went into virtual learning, and I just thought, well, hey, this might be a fun thing to do. Thank you for the award and for letting me compete in this contest. The reason why you should join next year's comic book contest is because it's just a fun way to make a story through art. So.
This is the age group from 14 to 17. It was really close. Both submissions that we had were pretty close to the same theme. However, the winner for this year's Eternals category is Ruby and Adeline Enklem with Honey Hammies and The Great Escape.
My name is Adeline Enklem,
My name is Ruby Inklum.
and our story was
Honey Hammy's Great Escape. Our inspiration for the story was that we have two hamsters at home and they constantly try to escape from their cages. The story is if our hamsters actually did escape, what might happen. We entered this contest because we thought it might be a fun thing to do over the summer. It gave us something to do other than watch TV. We think you should do it too. It's a fun thing to do, you can use your imagination, and it's lots of fun.
This is our adult category, 18 or plus. It's always the widest range of themes in this category. There was some really great, this is always another tough one to score. There were 3 submissions that were a quarter point apart, which is insane. I couldn't believe how close it was. But the winner of the Celestial category is Craig Knit for Our World in Quarantine. Now, Craig was the winner last year, so hopefully next year somebody can step up to the plate and take his crown. We'll see what happens.
Hey everybody, my name is Craig Knit, and thank you so much for selecting me for the Celestials award winner. I won it last year, so I had no intention of entering again, but I work with youth, so I wanted my kids to be working on a comic book over the summer during this pandemic, and I wanted them to kind of feel like they weren't alone. So I was making pages to go with the pandemic story while they were working alongside at home, and it ultimately ended up being more of an emotional rescue for me as a creator, keeping my own sanity. So I was trying to have my students stay sane while this craziness in this world is happening, and it ended up being very healthy for me. So once the pages were all finished, and this one's so nice, isn't that great? But once all my pages were done, I'm like, oh, I might as well enter the contest anyways, because I've got all this really cool stuff done. And then I won it a second time. Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. One of the things that I remember about Mark Gruenwald is that first and foremost, he's from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So I was always really excited, this is a hometown fella that made good with real professional comics. That's so awesome. And when I first started doing my student teaching in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, my supervising teacher was friends with Mark. So I was doing comic exercises with my students, and she said, I'm going to write Mark a letter. And no sooner had she done that, and Mark sent me 8 original comic pages. He didn't even know me at all, but he did something so generous for me when I'm starting out as a teacher that I've never forgotten that, and I've always been trying to pay that forward. So Mark, wherever you are, thank you so much for that generosity. All right, first and foremost, when you're making a comic page, it's not always going to be fun. It's not always going to be a joy. But for me, the absolute joy is looking at what you've done with your time and seeing what happens, and you know that you can't even go to sleep until this page is done because it's turning out so interestingly. This is a chapter break, and it wasn't part of my other pages, but it's a part of it now. So sometimes the reward is in what you can do with your time. I would encourage anybody and everybody to get out there and create a story for the Comic Book Challenge. The thing that I strongly believe is that every single person in the world has a unique story that they can share with the world. And it's your responsibility to get out there and do it. Oh, I can't draw very well. You know what? It doesn't matter. Keep practicing and keep telling your story. And sooner or later, you're going to be making some really great things that only you can do. Get out there and make a comic.
Last but not least, we have the Incredibles category. The great thing with the Incredibles category is that it's family orientated. So mom and dad and the kids can all work together on a project. It's great team building, great thing to do with your family during the summer months. And the winner of the Incredibles category is Sarah Klein, Peyton Marquardt, and Maya Marquardt for Ignorance Crusher. Congratulations.
My name's Sarah Klein. This is my son,
Peyton Marquardt.
my daughter, Maya Marquardt. We won the family award for the comic book, the Mark Gruenwald comic book contest, and we are so very thankful for this award. We are very proud to accept it. Our inspiration for this comic was social justice and civil rights. With the recent passing of RGB, we would like to dedicate it to her. One of her quotes was to do whatever you can, even if it's a little bit, with whatever talent you have, to make a difference in the world. And this was our way of giving back. In the comic book, we talk about
racism and LGBTQ and immigrants.
And the three of us worked on it all summer as a way to pass the pandemic and lockdown, and it really brought us closer. So thank you so much for this opportunity. So this comic book is something that I think any family could do. I am not an artist by any means, and we did it as a way to get closer together and didn't expect to win. And I think any family could do this, and it was a lot of fun. What was your most favorite part about it?
Well, what I liked was that I liked coloring it, and I liked reading it too, because there was a lot of stuff that I had learned that I didn't know much. And what brought us even more closer was that the stuff that has been happening, that we all got to talk about it and stuff.
And it was a way for us to bring BLM and try to kind of explain that in our lives. Is there anything that you really enjoyed, Peyton?
Oh, I guess reading the comic, it was really, really good, and I like how well put together it was.
Okay. So yeah, I think any family should give this a try next year, because if we can win, I think anyone can win.
All right, and now we're on to our honorable mentions. Because there's always great work that doesn't win the prize, and this year it was really tough. It was so hard for me to make a decision on this, but the winner for the House of Heroes honorable mention is Cody Stelzner for Mythfits.
Hi, I'm Cody Stelzner, and I won honorable mention in the Mark Gruenwald comic competition. And this is my comic here, Mythfits, and it's about 3 heroes that have to save a village from Typhon's curse. The main character in this book is named Mal, and she always wanted to become a superhero, but she can't control her powers. So she goes on a quest with a couple friends to help her along the way. And I always was inspired by Greek mythology and drawing creatures and animals. And really proud to be part of the Mark Gruenwald competition and to get a chance to do this. And And thank you for the wonderful prizes I got from House of Heroes and for sponsoring me. Thank you.
All right, and like Scott said, picking between all the comics this year for the ones that didn't win was really hard because there's a lot of great stuff. But one really came out to me, it spoke out to me. The artwork was awesome, the story was awesome. So Zeroni's pick this year is Ari Hawk from Espírito de Apoa. Just a beautiful comic.
All right, and our final honorable mention is from the Winnebago County Literacy Council. Their pick is Bane Schuhart with Dinosaur Hero. He's one of the younger contestants, so congratulations, Bane.
I won an award, and my name is Bane, and mine is about a dinosaur saving the world by hitting a meteor with his head.
And that's going to wrap it up for the Mark Gruenwald Comic Book Creation Challenge for 2020. We really appreciate it. Congratulations to all the winners and the honorable mentions.
Yep, we want to thank everybody. The submissions were awesome again. We can't wait to see what you come up with next year.
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Tom Perry, Executive Director of the Winnebago Area Literacy Council. We are a proud sponsor and benefactor to the Mark Gruenwald Comic Book Creation Challenge. The challenge was created a couple of years ago to help students during the summer retain the skills that they needed to be good students when the fall semester started. Everybody knows that literacy and comics are strongly related, and I'm one of the people who grew up reading comics. It's how I learned to read, it's how others learn to read. And so we decided to create this comic in honor of Mark Gruenwald, a lifetime Oshkosh native, to bring out the creativity of our community member as a whole.
My name's Chuck Nichols. I grew up with Mark Gruenwald. We lived on the same block. I lived on Pierce Avenue and he lived on Sawyer. And we ran into each other. We both loved comic books and superheroes. We were in that age when that was kind of the golden age of comics and everything. And the more we hit it off, the more we hung out. And eventually we had Justice League of America Club with a bunch of the neighborhood kids were different characters, and we'd play out and play outside, stuff like that. Mark was already a good artist way back then for his age, like really good. So he would draw adventures that we were in and this and that and stuff. We did some old Polaroids, the old Polaroids, are self-developing and stuff. My mom made up a green t-shirt for me with question marks all over it. I was the Riddler, okay, and Mark was Batman, so he had a little bit of a costume too, and we'd have his sister take pictures of us in fighting poses.
He was all about continuity, and to me that's so important because continuity, it makes sense and it's respectful to the reader. So, like, if you take a character like Captain America, he's going to behave a certain way. Like, for example, he's not going to pick up a gun necessarily and shoot someone as his first option, right? That's not in the character. So he always works within those bounds. And if he does do a story, which he did where Cap had to make a choice about, picking up a gun and saving, 200 people, there has to be a very, very good reason for it. So I always appreciated that because, as a reader, you don't want people to play fast and loose with characters in the history. And it's like if something happened in a comic book last year, those story threads could be picked up again a year or 10 years later. And maybe something is revealed that the reader didn't know that can be like a big surprise, but there's still an explanation why. So the thing, I've always been very attracted to continuity because it just, everything matters then. You know, that old expression about, well, what would that person have in their pockets? And then you could kind of, like, it's, I feel like with Mark was kind of like that. He knew what was in his character's pockets, you know, like down to the personality and like, oh yeah, well, of course he would carry a pocket knife because he's always prepared. Or of course he has, you know, that in his utility belt or something. When you think about someone who hasn't been here now for 20 years and like looking at Facebook messages today, so many people were just sharing their love. And so many people that like myself had never met him started off by writing things like, you know, I never met him, but, and then had all these things to say. And it was like, how often does that happen where, you know, someone has that legacy where people are just like, oh my gosh, like to think about, you have this body of work and you kind of know someone, even if you never met them, through their characters and through their writing and just through their ideas, just meeting different people in the comic book world that have stories to share. I feel like everyone that worked with him has all these amazing stories. So I just love reading them all, you know, or listening to them all, you know, when they're sharing these things. I feel like he just, if there's one thing, he just seemed to connect so many people. And obviously even people that never met him, he seems to like just connect all of us. It's pretty amazing.
That's such a testament to creativity and to artistry and to literacy, I think, Dan. And what a wonderful reason to have libraries and communities, because we're all going to be gone one day, but Mark's work will still be there the same way Mark is gone right now. But there's always going to be another 14-year-old or 9-year-old kid that's going to come across that and fall in love again and have it resonate again, because creativity connects to the ones that it needs to connect to, and that lifeline continues. And again, that idea of the human element in it, even though you've not met them, you know their story because you've met the people they've created. That lineage just keeps going. And how lovely is that? Can you give us like the zeitgeist of the comic world when he gets into the comic world? What's happening at that time? Do you know that comic history?
I feel like it was still the time where the fans became the creators, you know, because in the early days, you know, these guys were the ones that were making up all of these things out of their own minds. But I feel like even a little bit before Mark too, but that generation was when we were fans, we loved this stuff, and now we're working for Marvel. So now we get to play, like, as they say, like in this toy box, in this sandbox with all these characters. So I feel like they were just waiting to, you know, get to their ideas. And, you know, all of a sudden it just blew up. I mean, I couldn't imagine that feeling though, once you have access to be like, wow, like as a creator, I can do whatever I want with, you know, like, I mean, within certain limitations, but you know, it's really, it's the limits of your imagination. And I just love that idea, because if you were to say that as like a movie director or something, you know, that's how many millions of dollars of special effects. But for a comic book script, you could write whatever you want. And it's just, you know, up to the artist to create it. But there's no budget on that. Like when you have a movie, there's a certain budget you have. Like with comic books, you can just, you know, have as many explosions or universes or whatever as you want. You just have to be able to put it on a piece of paper. Just a little bit before Watchmen came out, Mark did this 12-issue series for Marvel called Squadron Supreme. And the Squadron Supreme, even though they were Marvel characters, they were like, how would you say, like homages or like the Justice League characters. So instead of calling him Superman, it was Hyperion. You know, instead of Wonder Woman, it was Power Princess. So he was basically writing a DC Justice League story, but it was Marvel and the Avengers. And it was kind of like, you know, Watchmen-esque in the sense that what if these heroes with all these powers took over the world to make it a better place, and then of course everything exploded in their faces. But so that came out in '85. But the connection was so that those 12 comic books were then compiled into a trade paperback collection in 1997. Okay. And Catherine, and at that point he had died a year before that. But Catherine wrote the foreword to the Squadron Supreme trade paperback. Okay. And once you read it, I've never read anything like it, because in it she writes about how in his will, you know, his last wish was to have some of his ashes mixed in with the ink of a comic book project. And she did that, and the ink was mixed in with the ashes of this trade paperback. And I mean, once you read something like that, you never forget it. Because of that trade paperback, though, that I read that story, and again, like how often, I think that's even in the book of Guinness Book of World Records, that whole like mixing in the ashes with the ink.
No.
I think so. Because
what would it be? What would the record be?
You know, like strange requests, like the last request, the fact that your ashes are mixed in, so you can literally say like, you know, like you are in this work, you know, like literally.
Yeah. Hannah, how do you think Mark's stamp is shown in Oshkosh?
That's interesting because, you know, I've been in Oshkosh my whole 24 years of life, you know, and I only just heard about the Mark Gruenwald through the comic book challenge. So I think his legacy actually is coming a lot through what we're doing through this event, you know, and because I've never heard of him, of his works until now. So I just think that what we're doing is the pretty much the most important.
When you become connected with comics, you immediately lose your place in place and get into that comic world. So Mark lives very strongly any place where comics live very strongly. And that is not a geographic identity necessarily. We have the comic book store that's right downtown, which I'm sure if Scott was here, he would say his connection to Open House of Heroes came because of reading Gruenwald's work. We have Zeroni's Pizza, which is a superhero-themed pizza place. And I believe that the owner, John and Scott, the owner of the comic book store, were the two people that had the brainchild of this comic book creation challenge. They're both around our age, I'd say, Dan, so I think that they wanted to give back and do an homage to the person that meant a lot to them when they grew up here. Maybe Hannah's a little bit younger than that, but I think that definitely shows that there is a deep connection because they are both big comic book people, and so they definitely have a deep connection with him.
Thank you to Mark for introducing me to this group of people and to this challenge, because like I heard of it at the library and stuff like that, but like it wouldn't exist without him, and you know, and I've just met so many nice people so far, and this has been really fun. So thanks to Mark for that.
Yeah, you know what? I would love to second that. The fact that, you know, Mark isn't here, but he is here, and he's kind of the thread right now through this whole discussion. And it was very nice to meet both of you. And, you know, just the fact that people are continuing to be inspired by his stories and to create their own things. Like, it was like, this is where we started, and it's just going to keep on going higher and higher with all of these different stories that now, you know, the next generation of creators, I would love to see what they're going to do with all of it. And I think we need to start pushing this word Gruenwaldian a lot more. We got to figure out the exact definition and then, you know, start putting it in conversation more often.
I think so too. Dan, thank you so much for joining us and joining the Gruenwald community from New York. Hannah, thank you for bringing Oshkosh here. I hope everyone has a really great night, and here's to Mark. Have a good night, everybody.